issue.
The ASEAN Economic Community.
Oh,
Can we be optimistic or pessimistic?
First, ASEAN was not intended to be like Europe, where there's an economic union. When we talk of single production base, it in fact means that not everything, for example, rice, will be included in your agenda right away, or a sensitive issue like sugar will be included right away. So there will be exceptions. Therefore, if there are exceptions, which industries will thrive the best? Even in the movement of labor, there are only 7 professions that have been discussing about mutual recognition arrangements so that a degree in Singapore is acceptable in the rest of ASEAN. Much more, a degree from the ASEAN will be acceptable in Singapore. For example, Philippines' lack of a kindergarten to 12-year education prohibited our own engineers and nurses from being recognized as professional engineers and nurses, even in ASEAN. So when they are working in Singapore, they're not considered as engineers, they're considered as draftsmen. And so pity the Filipino engineer that thinks when they go abroad, they'll be treated as legitimate engineers. Now, with what we call the Washington Accord, we will be recognized as equivalent to the Commonwealth countries that accept engineering as a degree that requires 12 years college education, kindergarten to college education. That means that indeed, in reality, the AEC will not happen in practice. But again, this is all aspirational. For example, who can say that the United States of America is united? They're all divided. How about Europe? The fact that there is an economic union, does that mean that the Europeans are really united as an economy? Look, even the euro is not accepted by Britain. And even membership in the security arrangement is not accepted by all. So there is a selective way of making sure you cooperate in certain areas. This is what a European calls variable geometry. Meaning to say, if you are part of a security arrangement in Europe, you don't need to be part of the monetary unity in Europe. Same as in ASEAN, we're very selective. We have what is known as ASEAN minus X formula. You can join one group for this, you can join another group for that, and you don't need to be in all groups. And that's exactly what the modern world is suggesting to us. You can be a member of some, but you need not be a member of all, and you can still call yourself in spirit a united community. I think the fact that families are intact, but there are siblings that fight, and there are husbands and wives who also fight, does not mean that the family does not exist. You can call it a dysfunctional family, you can call it a dysfunctional ASEAN, but to them, they're still family. And to ASEAN, it's still a community. So no community is perfect, and no nation is perfect, but we're all trying to exist in what Mr. Evale has said, a VUCA world, a very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. We are no longer in the Westphalian stage of Henry Kissinger. We are in a completely different world. If nation states are the only determining factor for success in an economic community, then how do you explain the presence of multinationals all over the world, including Chinese multinationals and Filipino multinationals that are making waves despite government Westphalian interventions?
Thank you so much, professors. At this point of the program, we have one more question from Ms. Therese Nesho Ortega from SM Investments.
Thank you, Professor Achari and Professor Macaranas. Changing gears a little bit. In a move to provide a more inclusive economic growth and prosperity, ASEAN's thrust in agriculture is quite critical. How do you think the ASEAN group can harness its agricultural strength and also food security and work towards better economic integration to improve or lessen poverty in our region? Thank you.
That's really your question.
Okay.
Food security, poverty.
Agriculture.
I have some things to say, but
Food security is a major concern of all groups around the world. In fact, in Europe, when you talk about food security, they take a very, very deep position on that. That's why many of the producing countries for agriculture ally themselves when they produce certain goods. So like the Cairns Group, they are very particular about the export and import status of food. Now for ASEAN, I think we are very proud that Self-sufficiency in rice was established through an institute in the Philippines called IRRI, International Rice Research Institute. While the Philippines did not benefit from this miracle rice of a revolution, China and India did. And we're very proud to announce that indeed, were it not for the research of the scientists in Los Baños, the Philippines, India and China would still be at a stage in food security that is at a riot level, where people will riot for food. The two winners of the Ramon Magsaysay on rice research are from India and China for their making sure that the self-sufficiency of those two giant countries are provided for through modern technology. So what does that mean? ASEAN can still be, as I said, a service provider. In agriculture, you can produce services like research that will be paid for by the world. You don't have to produce the rice physically. You can ask, let's say, Vietnam and Myanmar to produce the rice more cheaply, and then the Philippines can buy that. But the research should be done in the Philippines because the international community has recognized that the talents in this country are good enough to attract the other scientists in this respectable institution. Now, in other parts of ASEAN, there are other kinds of research groups going on. For example, for vaccines, traditional medicine, drugs, ASEAN has united itself in what is known as an ASEAN network for drugs, vaccines, traditional medicine, and diagnostics innovation. Our saving grace is that in ASEAN, we have talents who can lower the cost of drugs so that poor people can afford them. Again, the classic example is a Ramon Magsaysay winner from Thailand. This lady, I forgot her name, but it will come in a while. What did she do? AIDS was very expensive to cure in Thailand. So she did her own government pharmaceutical office research, and with the help of other teams, she was able to lower the cost of a cocktail drug for AIDS 18 times that of the West. 18 times is a lot for poor people. And with her Buddhist sentiments, she said, now that I have Thailand and Asia and ASEAN, let me go to Africa. Where in Africa, she was able to do the same for 7 other countries scourged with AIDS. What does that mean? The talent in ASEAN is not merely planting rice. It is research and development. You think that we do not have the talents? We have the talents. They were educated in the West. But precisely because we do not publicize them, we think we are the backwaters of science and technology. Now, in health, I am pleased to announce that in August 2015, the Philippines will host the World Global Assembly for Health. And NGOs and poor countries will discuss with the World Health Organization precisely the question of the lady, which is how do you lower the price of drugs for many of the poor people of the planet and not only ASEAN? We are looking towards an Indian partnership because India, of course, is the pharmaceutical drugs capital of the world. And the generics business is showing that poor people can survive dengue and all of the other modern diseases associated with climate change, provided we harness the talent of ASEAN. What has been happening? Our pharmacists are migrating to Japan, Germany, the United States, because they do not think there is hope in this part of the world. But if governments listen to what the professionals are saying, why don't you establish new industries in this place where you use the human resources, the knowledge base in an IT-mediated world? So gone are the days where the fetchers of water, the hewers of wood, and all that thing that are related with the old colonial days. We are modernizing. And India, having sent an orbiter to Mars, well, it's not unknown to many Filipinos here that Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, was trained by 2 Filipino scientists at Purdue University, my alma mater. How? They were teaching aeronautical engineering. How come they did not teach aeronautical engineering in the Philippines? Because there was no market in the Philippines. But the fact that they are celebrated as having trained those first astronauts in Purdue University is significant message to the Philippines. You can establish science-based and technology-based industries together with the rest of ASEAN. And that's our hope. ASEAN is not seen merely as natural resource exporter. We will process the natural resources. We're not seen merely as producing food. We will make sure that the new varieties of food will come from the brains of our people and not just the bronze. And hopefully, we're not seen really by the colonial people as, hey, you guys only have bronze, you don't have brains.
Thank you.
And for the concluding statement, Professor Acharya?
I just want to say, if you have that slide of the book that I gave you, some people are asking about where to get my book. We had some information. If you can show that on screen. If they don't have it ready, we can show it afterwards. And while we're talking, I just wanted to say that the meaning of food security is also changing. I don't think we are talking about the traditional, like famine kind of a situation. And as you said, India and China have done extremely well, and partly because of the rice research institutes, like you mentioned in the Philippines. But I still think malnutrition is a problem. Not having enough food, or the right kind of food. Humanitarian emergencies is a problem. And ASEAN must do more about providing relief and food at a time of humanitarian disasters, which is very frequent in Southeast Asia. And ASEAN has set up a disaster center now. I think it's in Thailand. And there's a lot more to be done on that front. And this is, by the way, the third edition of the book from which I was speaking. There is a couple of other books I've written, but this is the main one on ASEAN. And it's available with either Amazon.com or with Routledge. And if I can go back to the very beginning of my slide, very beginning of my, it's like the front page, #1 slide. And the most important thing I wanted to say to you for this session is going to be this #1 slide, which will have, can we go back? Okay, my Twitter address. I know Philippines is an information savvy society, social media, so follow me on Twitter. I invite you, and you can always be in touch with me wherever I am going. There's nothing private about my life anymore. And so it'll be all tweeted, and you will find also a lot of information, and if you want where to get the book, or a lot of my writings, by the way, are in the website. Hundreds of my writings and articles freely available at this website, so you can download them. It's especially popular with students. And if you want to get a copy of the book and you want to get a discount, write to me and I will forward it to the publisher. But whatever you do, follow me on Twitter.
That's at Amitav Acharya on Twitter. And also don't forget, #FPLA. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, professors. This ends our first session. Thank you. While we prepare for the second session, we offer you not only a sumptuous buffet menu, but also a learning experience. You may check the ASEAN exhibit outside, courtesy of our partners from the AIM ASEAN 2015 project. So just outside, there's an exhibit. If you want to know the basics of ASEAN integration, you just go there and there's someone who could readily answer your simple questions on ASEAN. Once again, thank you very much. Lunch is served. Good afternoon, and once again, welcome to the Executive Talks. For ASEAN to trend as a topic among its stakeholders, there is no denial that it matters to the country's different industries. In this second session, we have gathered 4 top executives from the First Pacific Group, and a representative from the religious sector, and 3 ASEAN experts in a panel discussion with Professor Amitav Acharya. And now, it is with great pride that I introduce to you the moderator for this session. Joining Professor Acharya on stage is an assistant professor in the International Studies Department of De La Salle University, Manila. Her research areas are U.S. Southeast Asia relations, ASEAN, and regionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Dr. Charmaine Misalucha. And now it is with great pride that I introduce to you the executives joining the panel discussion. First on the list is the Assistant Director at First Pacific Company Limited. Her practice focuses on banking, finance and securities, construction and infrastructure, investments, mergers and acquisitions, and mining and natural resources. She graduated cum laude from the University of the Philippines College of Law in 1980 and placed second in the nationwide Philippine Bar Examination in the same year. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Attorney Marilyn Victorio Aquino. Our next executive comes from, we have the Senior Vice President for Corporate Affairs of Felix Mining Corporation and the head of the MVP Group of Companies Media Bureau. He has a Master of Laws degree at the London School of Economics and Political Science. He also sits as an elected member of the Executive Council of the ASEAN Law Association of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome the one and only Attorney Michael Toledo. Our next executive is an MBA graduate from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and he is the Vice President of First Pacific's Group Corporate Development. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Noel Torres. Our next executive comes from the Hospital Group. She is the President and CEO of Cardinal Santos Medical Center. She has extensive experience in the hospital industry and spent several years at the University of Santo Tomas Hospital as the hospital's Chief Operating Officer and the Hospital Director of Manila Doctors Hospital. A lawyer and a human resource expert, let's all welcome Attorney Pilar Nenuca Almira. Indeed, ASEAN matters to every industry. Joining our group of executives is a representative from the church. He is the Secretary for Media and Social Communications of the Jesuit Conference in Asia and the Pacific. He is currently the Executive Director of the Jesuit Communications Foundation and Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Father Emmanuel Nono Alfonso. The aim of this session is to understand ASEAN by bridging theory and practice. In addition to Professor Acharya on stage, our industry leaders will engage in a dialogue with our other two ASEAN affairs specialists. Today, we are privileged to have the presence of our first woman Secretary of Foreign Affairs. A career diplomat, she also took on the position of Director General for the ASEAN National Secretariat of the Philippines, during which she actively engaged in a number of ASEAN and APEC summits. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Ambassador Delia Albert. Our other ASEAN expert is the Assistant Director of the Foreign Service Institute, the think tank of the Department of Foreign Affairs. He provides policy analysis and strategic advice on ASEAN issues, Southeast Asia security and international relations, and foreign service to several offices in the Department of Foreign Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Julio Amador III. Once again, this is Understanding ASEAN, Meeting Theory and Practice. Dr. Misalucha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ace, and good afternoon to everybody. This morning's session allowed us to paint a broad picture of ASEAN. It highlighted the specific historical circumstances that became the impetus for the creation of this organization. Equally important, we were able to tease out the nuances of contemporary geopolitics and how certain trends can continue to shape the ASEAN community. This afternoon, we bridge theory and practice via a dialogue between industry leaders and ASEAN affairs specialists. This way, we engage in what we referred to earlier today as a bottom-up approach, which is precisely the spirit of the creation of an ASEAN community. Against this backdrop, I invite our industry leaders to give their remarks on why ASEAN matters to them, after which our ASEAN specialists can offer their responses. In the interest of time, may I request each speaker to keep their remarks short, about maybe 5 minutes per person. This will also allow us to engage with the audience later. So may I invite Attorney Aquino to begin?
Thank you. ASEAN matters to us because our businesses, the First Pacific Group businesses and business interests are located in Indonesia and the Philippines, home to more than 50% of the 620 million population of ASEAN. So our group's focus is really to monitor the developments in the economic integration of ASEAN. And there are a few matters and issues which I'd like to raise for discussion. The first is the anti-competition bill. As Professor Macarana said, the Philippine Congress is in the process of passing an anti-competition law as part of its commitment to the ASEAN economic integration for 2015. But unlike Professor Macarana's, I believe that size do matter. So both in the case of the anti-competition law and in case of business, the size is important for the anti-competition law because there are at least two provisions in the anti-competition law which is going to be passed before the year is over and which is patterned after the anti-competition law of ASEAN, which focus on size. Number one is market dominance. When you reach a certain percentage of your market, you go into the radar of the regulators for purposes of monitoring whether or not you're using market dominance, you're exercising practices abusive of market dominance. Earlier, it was set at 40% in the draft bills, but I think they will go to 50%. The second issue in case of size in the anti-competition bill is where you have a merger and the merger will result in market share in excess of the 50%. There you need approval of the competition authorities. So size is important with respect to the anti-competition bill, which is uniformly being adopted more or less in substance in ASEAN. It is also important in terms of business. So what are my observations in this respect? I note that the anti-competition bill that will be passed in the Philippines and that has been passed in ASEAN countries focus on the size within a country, nationwide. So therefore, what do you have? You have businesses that are necessarily small because market dominance is measured nationally, not measured by the ASEAN regional economy, which is actually much smaller than China, much smaller than India, or even Japan in terms of economic size. So I thought that if you're building an ASEAN region, you would focus on dominance within ASEAN region because you would like your industries to achieve size in terms of assets and business so that they're able to compete within ASEAN region or even within or outside of ASEAN within Asia. But that's not the focus of the anti-competition bills right now. So there's that disconnect. So what good is the ASEAN market if each ASEAN country will prevent the buildup of dominance and capacity for the ASEAN market? That's my question. The next point is harmonization of government policies and standards. I cannot overemphasize the importance of harmonization of government policies and standards to fair competition within ASEAN, because businesses must be allowed to flourish and build competitive advantage. While businesses can control its own operations and the efficiencies within its operations, businesses are at the mercy of government when it comes to government restrictions, impositions, taxes, etc., etc. Businesses can be put at a disadvantage by government that adopts policies such as exorbitant taxes, inefficient power policies that allow power supply to fall short of the needs of businesses, cumbersome permitting process, bias against certain businesses like natural resources, and populist policies, among others. And the Asian governments must acknowledge that in building an ASEAN economy or integration, half of the effort or the job must at least come from them. They must be able to complement the efforts of the private sector. What are my observations? My question is, how can fair competition happen when some businesses benefit from enlightened policies of one country, while others are suffocated by innumerable restrictions and burdens from another? And this is very important because ASEAN intends to lift the tariff by 2015. So what happens? There is equality or harmonization in one aspect, but operationally, businesses are located in different countries with varying permitting or government restrictions or liberalization. So what happens? Only products produced in countries with enlightened economic policies will prosper. For example, in a country where your government does not respond to business, does not have liberal policies, imposes exorbitant taxes, you will be a buyer of goods, you will not be a seller. What will prosper in your country will be produced of other companies that are located in countries with more liberal and enlightened economic policies. But you want to avoid this. If you will lift tariff, you must also have a level playing field with respect to the other aspects of the business. And that, of course, means less government regulations and basically, if possible, and this is, I think, consistent with the goal of ASEAN to promote uniform standards and technical regulations, if they can promote some sort of an anti-red tape policy that protects businesses from government inaction, then you have a level playing field both from the tariff side and from the operation side. The other suggestion, I think, is it's a food for thought. I know that ASEAN is not an EU, but it is a political aggravation, and there's a matter of faith as far as ASEAN is concerned. There's a such thing as a voluntary compliance with certain requirements, which is in fact happening when it comes to standards for governance with respect to listed companies within ASEAN. Maybe we should consider, if it's at all possible, to promote some sort of uniformity in taxation of businesses in ASEAN as well. This will greatly stabilize the pricing of basic costs of businesses like power and financing all over ASEAN. Then it makes lifting of the tariff, it makes sense.
Attorney Aquino, if I may, thank you for those very interesting points. And I think the significance of Attorney Aquino's remarks is how to ensure fair competition once the community is in place. If I may invite Attorney Toledo to give his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasant good afternoon to everyone. I'm sure lately you've been in social media as well as in traditional media, you've been hearing about the ice bucket challenge. And lately, a good friend of ours came up with the rice bucket challenge, which in my opinion really is more relevant to the Philippines in particular, giving free rice to those who are in need. But I think the challenge that we can pose to the government really now is what we call the AEC challenge. because I personally am of the view that ASEAN integration, as was already espoused by our previous speakers, is more of a journey rather than a destination at this point. We know that the divergence in our levels of development, divergence in social, cultural, and religious factors, as well as policies, will really make it a bit difficult. But then, having said that, it doesn't mean that we do not continue to engage. We must continue to engage, and we must be in the same runway. Now, talking about our industry in particular, let me focus, because Attorney Aquinas discussed basically the industries of which the First Pacific Group is into. So let me now focus on mining. Well, at the moment, Philippine setting, well, I have to say that mining is really hampered by the utter lack of government policy, if there is even a government policy to begin with. But let me talk about first about the economic factors which are also hindrance to the development of mining in the Philippines, and hopefully through ASEAN integration this could help the industry. Economic factors will be financing, the low quality and inadequate infrastructure, human capital, or what you call the brain drain, and low linkages. On the non-economic factors, that's where the complex and uncertain legal and policy framework comes into play. It's sad because we have a law which was hailed as one of the best laws ever crafted on natural resources development, the Philippine Mining Act of 1995, which was questioned so many times for its being unconstitutional. It took another 8 years, or 7 to 8 years, before the Supreme Court again, in another landmark decision, said, no, this is constitutional. But can you imagine, 7, 8 years, the Philippines was deprived of investments, billions of dollars worth of investments that could have come in. But because of that law being questioned, again, our growth in that industry that can, of course, add to inclusive growth and economic development to the country was stalled. And then now it's being questioned again for the nth time, sadly. The government came up with EO 79, which, in my opinion, does not really clarify the state of the mining industry. It did try, to a certain extent, but it is still unsure. And up to now, a revenue sharing mechanism, which is important for businessmen and for planners to really plan on the taxation scheme that will govern the industry, is yet to be passed. They are saying that they would like to accelerate this or expedite this, but unfortunately, up to now, there is no law that has been passed, at least the version of government, on revenue sharing. And this has caused a lot of uncertainty in the industry. Of course, there are also security reasons. Of course, there's also a rising resource nationalism, which is felt now in Indonesia. And there are, I think, the new President Widodo of Indonesia is looking at this new policy because there have been moves in the previous administration to, again, go back to resource nationalism. Now, what do we expect from ASEAN? And how can regional cooperation help? Perhaps this ASEAN could link government and business through PPP. It could also foster great linkage development policies and strategies. It could also support investment in infrastructure and skills development. We are hoping that through ASEAN integration, it could help set up a permanent and updated geological and mining network among countries. Because out of this moment, I don't think such an infrastructure exists. And perhaps through ASEAN integration, we can have this. Can contribute to joint exploration, cross-exploration and development of mineral resources, and again, shared infrastructure. There's a big possibility there. ASEAN integration could also help establish information exchange regarding geology, mining, metallurgy, technology and science, compatible mining laws and regulations, education and dissemination of mining activities, encounters with other sectors, education, economy, trade, and joint mining prognosis work. So we are hoping that in our industry, in particular in the mining industry, that ASEAN integration can contribute to this.
Thank you very much, sir. And also for highlighting the fact that ASEAN and everything that we're doing is more a process rather than a definite distinctive output in the very near future. So now we move to Mr. Torres for his remarks.
Thank you, Charmaine. I come from the investment side of the business, so I do outward investments on behalf of First Pacific, basically joint ventures, partnerships, investment opportunities in the region, and I spend some time in and out of different ASEAN markets for a while now. Now, during the course of my work, I've asked myself, how much time do I think about ASEAN economic integration? And the answer is, it's been limited at best. It's probably because the industries that we're in are not in the traditional tradable goods businesses, so telecom, infrastructure, utilities. These are industries that would not directly benefit from free trade within ASEAN. That being said, we've been thinking about ASEAN as a regional opportunity for quite some time now. And a fully integrated ASEAN would represent a tremendous opportunity to businesses in the Philippines in a number of ways. First, the sheer size of the region. You're talking about 620 million population, more than 6 times Philippines' population. Almost 3 trillion in GDP. Again, almost 10 to 12 times of Philippines' GDP. The market is much more bigger, the opportunities are more dynamic, and with the right strategy, you can plan for business on a broader scale than if you limit your perspective to 1 or 2 markets within the region. The second opportunity, I think, is in interconnectivity and sharing resources. There's a report on the ASEAN website that says there's an ASEAN highway network that will physically connect, key roadways and priority transit routes to build infrastructure. There's an ASEAN power grid that is being contemplated. There is a trans-ASEAN gas pipeline. And there's telecom infrastructure and open skies policies are being discussed. I think I read somewhere there's about 240 million Muslims in ASEAN, 125 million Christians, 150 million Buddhists, and followers of folk religions. So addressing the needs of this populace is not as straightforward. In other respects, we always ask ourselves, how do we compete versus other regional players, and what is our competitive edge? If you have scale in one market, such as our group does, it doesn't automatically mean you'll be competitive in other markets. So then, you throw the question to the government in a way, So what does the government done, or what will the government do to help Philippine corporations, compete in a regional marketplace? Is it just left up to the corporations themselves to sort of, get competitive and work by themselves, or will the government provide support? What are the priority areas that the government is looking at? In a survey this year, the American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, American businesses, 73% of American businesses think their ASEAN businesses will grow. However, only 50% of those companies have ASEAN-specific strategies. So what does that tell you? In a way, it tells you American businesses expect growth, but they don't know what the direction is in the region. What can we expect? Can we expect clear guidelines from ASEAN to tell businesses where they should focus on in order to grow their business?
Thank you very much. Also for highlighting the fact that in economics and trade, there will always be winners and losers. And on the side of ASEAN, therefore, we need to consider the fact how we should deal with the equitable distribution of benefits once we move on with this project. So with this, we can move on to Attorney Almira's remarks.
Thank you very much, Charmaine, and a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. The ASEAN integration will bring about better health care and wellness facilities for the region to be the preferred choice and challenge each country to raise the level of education and learning of healthcare professionals. The integration will encourage complementation, even locally in the Philippines, and networking for better manpower balance and development. In some countries, they lack nurses. We have a lot of nurses. In some countries, they have a lack of doctors. We have a lot of doctors. And with this balancing, we would be able to complement talents and make use of our talents to be able to serve the other countries in the region. Diversity, as has been discussed, will certainly enrich the complementation. And as I have been in Singapore lately, they need a lot of people. And, you know, we have the people, and we have highly educated people. In the integration, this will facilitate the harnessing and the synergy of the use of human talents. The integration will loosen bureaucracy of people movement for overall regional human capital growth. So our culture is accepting and peace-loving, and this will be for mutual benefits. And I believe that laws on health and wellness will be made equitably by each country. There shall be infrastructure for standardizing approach to healthcare treatment and modalities. This will facilitate the collaboration and networking of healthcare experts, particularly our doctors, our researchers in healthcare-related professions. The integration will be facilitating the development of telehealth care, not only in treatment but in training. And this will be more cost efficient for everyone, especially for our patients. The integration will make available expertise across countries. The ASEAN integration will push each country to improve their educational system for retention. Working professionals and students will be benefited. Naturally, each country in the region will strive to keep their talents. And when they want to keep their talents, they will make sure that they will provide the best education for them, especially the healthcare professionals who are difficult to find. There shall be power of the region to negotiate for purchase of equipment and to influence research, pharma, and health-related manufacturing companies. So we will be challenged along this area. The region will face up with the challenge of developing and manufacturing products, supplies, and equipment to serve the region. This will serve as a challenge of innovation to each and every country so that we do not depend in the European countries or in the US for the kind of supplies, equipment, and other modalities that our patients and our healthcare professionals need in the region. I believe that there will be community building that will result ultimately to economic progress and will result to the best interest of the patients within the region, particularly in the Philippines. Given all this, I would like to pose 3 questions to our experts. The first question is, how do we make uniform the standards by which the competencies of the healthcare professionals will be measured when each country has its own licensure criteria and processes of qualifying? So I refer here to the licensure exams for all healthcare professionals, doctors, medtechs, nurses, radtechs, and so on. The second question to our experts, how could the healthcare institutions within the region complement their respective expertise, resulting to better options for the patients and clients, which in effect will likely be better than competing with each other? So complementation here is something that we need to focus so that we will have better outcome for all patients across all regions. The third question is, what kind of infrastructure should the ASEAN countries have to orchestrate so that the synergies will be there and that we can implement what we want to happen as we integrate? So with that, I submit, and thank you, Charmaine.
Thank you, Attorney Almira, for underscoring that labor is the force, the real force behind integration, and also for posing the question that most of our other panelists have raised earlier about the standardization or harmonization of standards. Now, may I invite Father Alfonso for your remarks?
Thank you, Charmaine. Good afternoon to all of you. I wrote down my thoughts because we priests can just go on and on in our homilies. If this gathering were a class, I feel like the transferee student. I feel out of place. Pinabili lang ng suka, naging panelist na. The odd man out in this company. I thought I was only going to lead you into an opening prayer or a closing ritual with incenso, but I was tasked to be a panelist as well. But of course, everybody in Southeast Asia, including the religious sector, which I represent today, should have a say on ASEAN integration. Allow me therefore to offer a few thoughts on the matter. Huwag po kayo maglala, 1.5 pages lang to. The first thought is simply an affirmation of ASEAN's importance for the Church. To the question that was sent to us to react or respond to, why does ASEAN matter to my industry? The clear answer is a resounding yes, it matters. Speaking in behalf of the Catholic Church, long before any multinational company or the rise of nation states in this part of the globe, the Church was already present in Asia. It was its mission area, the vineyard of the Lord. For us Jesuits, Asia became part of our missionary frontier when St. Francis Xavier set foot in India, then Malaysia, Japan, and finally China in the 1500s. And from these centuries of labor, Christianity has spread throughout Asia, with the Philippines leading the way. The same, however, can be said of other religions in Asia or Southeast Asia. They were already here, thriving and spreading their roots deep into people's culture long before any known multinational or transnational corporations. You have Islam in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei, while Buddhism dominates Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Singapore. Indeed, it has been observed that part of the beauty of the Southeast Asian region is the diversity of its faiths or religions. The raging debate, of course, is whether these faiths or religions have any influence on the economic and political lives or destinies of its people. If the so-called Protestant ethic has been a great contribution to the economic success of the U.S., can the same be said of Confucianism, which holds sway in the Buddhist countries like Singapore and China? What about Christianity? Is the Philippines really poor because it is a Catholic-dominated country, as some academics have asked before? We leave that, of course, to our distinguished speaker to answer. How indeed can ASEAN harness the diverse faiths it enjoys so that they can promote the goals of ASEAN integration? How can the ASEAN socio-cultural community tap the vast resources of the various faiths in Asia so that they can help in the economic and political development of the region? Firstly, then, ASEAN matters to the religious sector as the locus of its operations, or to use a religious term, its ministry. But secondly, ASEAN matters because as an institution, it more or less embodies or mirrors or reflects the way the religious sector works or operates. In other words, the so-called ASEAN way, which is dialogue, talking things through, is also the way of the Church, the only way of many legitimate religions, which is to say the way of peace and dialogue. If ASEAN has ministerial talks, the religious sector, especially the Catholic Church, has been engaged in interfaith and ecumenical dialogues, such as the Bishops' Ulama conferences in Mindanao. More importantly, the rationale or raison d'etre of ASEAN from the time of its establishment in 1967 is at the very heart of the existence of the Church. For ASEAN, its development, economic, political, and cultural, through cooperation and community building. For the Church, its salvation, redemption through communion, love, and solidarity. The final point I'd like to share, however, is more of a question, especially to our distinguished resource person. And this is the primary concern of the religious sector in any form of development or progress, such as the ASEAN integration next year. Are we indeed ready for the social impact of ASEAN? I remember in the 90s when we were all talking about GATT and WTO, we fought for safety nets. Are the safety nets ready this time for ASEAN integration? And this is a primary concern for the religious sector because more than governments, churches have staked their destinies with the poor and the marginalized. The Catholic Church alone is already considered the largest charitable institution in the world, with its network of parochial schools, hospitals, and social centers. Even before the integration next year, the Church has been actively involved in the issue of the migration of millions of peoples. 2 million Asians leave home every year, either to escape poverty or natural disasters, which are commonplace in the region and which displace millions annually. My own congregation, the Jesuit Order, has been running the Jesuit Refugee Service in Thailand since the 1980s. How is ASEAN preparing for the social impact of its integration? How is it striving to help its economies become more inclusive? Early this year, the Cardinal of Manila, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, was invited in the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. He said he was surprised to be invited since, like myself, he didn't know anything about economics. But the organizers explained to him that clearly faith impacts on global growth and development. It remains a rich resource for authentic human development. I hope ASEAN remembers that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father, for using culture as a force and for reminding us the inextricable links between the 3 pillars of the community. Now, clearly, ASEAN has a lot of work to do before the integration actually happens. And I would like to ask now our ASEAN experts to respond to the questions that have been posed by our industry leaders. But I would like to start first with Ambassador Albert. She has to leave immediately. So if we may begin with you, ma'am.
This is good. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I have to rush off and address my second favorite subject after ASEAN, which is women. We have a women's congress going on in another building, so I'll just have to put them in the afternoon session. But anyway, thank you so much. We were all talking about 1967. And when I looked at my card, it says, Understanding ASEAN. That was our first meeting in 1967 when I joined the Department of Foreign Affairs. So don't do your arithmetic. I joined the Department of Foreign Affairs in January of '67. We signed the Bangkok Declaration in August that year. And I was privileged to be the Social and Appointment Secretary of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. I hope you know who signed for the Philippines the ASEAN Declaration. It was Narciso Ramos. And as a young graduate of the University of the Philippines, I was most cynical that we were signing up to another organization. Earlier in '61, we signed up to the Association of Southeast Asia, or ASA. Actually, the hidden agenda there was to smoothen relationship between Malaysia and the Philippines. After independence, the whole region, and I would like to emphasize the importance of the political security aspects why ASEAN came about. And to reiterate your point, Professor Amitabh, that certainly economic cooperation was made a second thought. What they wanted to do was to make sure that the area was peaceful, there was stability, then you can talk about prosperity. But the way you see things now evolving, and I think this is something to think about, is that the relative prosperity we are enjoying today is a peace dividend. Peace dividend because we were able to maintain the relationship in the region, which ensured that we could face up to our local problems. And one should not miss that point, because context is very important in understanding the issues that were raised today. In those early days of 1967, I remember my cynicism was very vocal, and of course we had ASA, we had Mafilindo, which was to settle the problem between Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia. So you see, we were in the middle of a lot of these issues that were troubling the newly independent states of the region. And I remember very clearly Mr. Ramos telling me, look, young lady, of course I was young then.
Still young.
He said, fishing. Anyway, he said, don't forget, ASEAN will survive because it is ours. It is ours, it belongs to us in the region. And this I am documenting, of course, in a form of a paper with the ADB, because nobody seems to be around to remember the early days of ASEAN. And since coming back and retiring from the Foreign Service, I thought I would get back and be relevant and try to share whatever I've had as a diplomatic experience. Now, let me comment, that being said, and I think my first point was that the economic situation in ASEAN we find today is a peace dividend. One should never forget that if you look at other areas in the world today, the Middle East, for example, they can't move on because of the instability of the region. And perhaps this should be a very basic thing at the back of our minds when we think of ASEAN integration. And by the way, the word integration was a dirty word in ASEAN for many, many, many years. I couldn't even use it in my paper with my graduate school. We always talked about cooperation. So this 47 years of ASEAN, that's how old I am in the Foreign Service, 47, I divided it into 4 phases. First, we had the four phases, or the 4 C's, letter C, which makes it easier to remember. C were first were the consultations. Because the peace was prevailing, we started to talk to each other. And I think talking to each other, like what you're doing today, is very valuable in moving whatever issues we have forward. And I'd like to commend at this point the First Pacific to engage your colleagues, your friends, in an open discussion about what regional integration means to each and every aspect of the family of the First Pacific. I would like to suggest that every company in this country should sit down and do a dialogue like this. But this dialogue won't go anywhere unless you sit with government as well. And for this reason, the AIM, and this is a promotion because I'm with the board of AIM, we are organizing an ASEAN society where there will be dialogue, consultations between the private sector and government, so that before government commits you, you know exactly how it's going to affect you first before it will affect the others. And I think this is very crucial in the evolution of an organization or a community like what we are building today in ASEAN. The second C to me was commitment. When the leaders of the group, of the region were comfortable with each other, they agreed to commit. So one has to look at, if you have time, please read the ASEAN Declaration first, in order to put yourselves into the bigger picture of what we're talking about. if you are not familiar with the ASEAN Declaration, you will be lost. And the second paper that perhaps you'd like to read when you're in the traffic jam is the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, which gives you an insight to why we are where we are today. What we are talking about today, we're all contained in the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation of 1976. So that the first was consultations, then they went into commitment, and the third, letter C, was cooperation. I remember in every ASEAN meeting, you can count how many times the cooperation appears in the whatever text you're doing. So there was this wonderful willingness to cooperate. Why? Because in the ASEAN tradition, leaders have committed, and therefore now everybody has to commit. But in recent times, like in economic cooperation, I think there is now a need to more or less reverse that dialogue process where the base of the pyramid should start moving and influencing the leadership, which may serve to answer some of the issues that were brought about by the speakers. Now the fourth C, this is just to make my mind clearer and be able to talk in 5 minutes what I think ASEAN should be, is consolidation. The consolidation of all the things that happened from 1967 to the present means that we are now integrating a community. Consolidation means building that community, which started with a small letter C. We were not allowed to use the big letter C because the big letter C means a certain loss of sovereignty. And ASEAN was not prepared to do that in the early days. If I've sat through a lot of the, we call ourselves the workhorses of ASEAN, and up to the time I was foreign minister, the feeling of cooperating, of the approach of what you call mushawara, consensus building, always asking each other what is good for you, what is, it is a very, there is such a thing as an ASEAN way. And it is very difficult to define until you've sat in a negotiating table. And I remember someone said, what is the ASEAN way? And I had a little anecdote, and I said in one of our meetings, and in a big decision point, in the early days when the Philippine economy was leading, we were very outspoken, and we used to be the first to speak. And we would ask when a decision is up for a final say, we say, yes, we agree, but what's the legal basis? That reminds me of all the legal minds that were very, very present in Philippine participation in ASEAN. We liked an agreement, we like a memorandum, we always like a legal basis. We are known in ASEAN as Miss Legal Basis, although I'm not a lawyer. And then the second to respond would be Indonesia. Indonesia would say, yes, but what's the philosophy behind it? Meaning, does it accord to my Pancasila, the basic principles of our culture? And the third would be Thailand, and say, yes, but perhaps let's assign it to committees. And this is the nature of Thailand. They like to assign it to committees. And then the Malaysian would say, yes, but let me refer it to my home office. They're always scared to make an independent decision. And the last to speak, and I'm speaking of ASEAN 5, this was before 1984 when Brunei joined. Last to speak would be quietly, pensively, Singapore. And Singapore would say, yes, but what do we get out of it anyway? So economic cooperation in ASEAN really Singapore played a very important role. Why? Because Singapore did not have the resources that we have. They did not have the people that we have. They had to make do with what they had, and they had to always look for trade facilitation, investment